Good morning, everybody. Here to talk a little bit about TERUMO. As we said, just establishing our PMO in January of this year. So we kind of did a dual implementation, one with the PMO and then two rolling right in, CCPM, theory constraints, and concerto along with that. So a little bit of background, why listen to this presentation? I know we're in day 3 right now of Project Flow, but hopefully our first 10 months of CCPM implementation really enlightened us with obstacles and challenges of CCPM implementation that could apply to your company. So going through some of our lessons learned and other obstacles may apply to you that you could take back. We have seen significant benefits in less than 1 year of this implementation. We do know we have a lot of improvements to make, but from where we were, we've been very pleased so far. And lastly, we have total company implementation. So all across TERUMO Heart, everybody's using CCPM, concerto, and hopefully the cross-functional impact and global deployment may apply to your company as well. So a little bit about TERUMO Corporation in general. We're operable in over 150 countries right now. It was established in 1921. Globally, we are about $3 billion in annual sales, hosting over 12,000 associates. Specifically, TERUMO Heart, as they said, we are in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We have about 176 employees. We're definitely growing over the course of time, especially the LVAS market itself is estimated at $2.2 billion by 2017. So as we're trying to achieve that type of market, we've been bringing a lot more people on board, and the company's been growing at a rapid pace. A little bit more about just TERUMO in general, the products that they have. We have very invasive cardiac and vascular surgical products. The left ventricular assist system that we have at TERUMO Heart. We have grafts, stents, and very general hospital products like syringes, thermometers. So we kind of cover all ends of the spectrum in the medical industry. But specifically TERUMO Heart, again, we are a wholly owned subsidiary of TERUMO Corporation. They decided to pursue the LVAS technology in 1989. So in 2000, they moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and started working on the LVAS as a project. Then in 2003, TERUMO Heart was established with a principal focus on commercializing the left ventricular DuraHeart system. So again, the LVAS itself, from these images, it's designed for end-stage heart failure patients. These are patients awaiting heart transplants, but with the limited market, limited availability of hearts, our system hooks up to the left ventricle and the aorta and assists the heart in providing support and blood circulatory through the rest of the body. It is an active implantable system, so it does stay implanted in the patient until an explant would take place. So a little bit about the projects we're running at TERUMO Heart. Typically we have 3 project styles. CAPAs, which are corrective action, preventative action. These are regulated and audited items. A lot of the items for CAPAs come from FDA and other regulatory agencies for us to put corrective actions in place. So once they come back to audit us again, these are items we have to show improvement or corrective action for those items. Next is system development. Whether it be business or quality systems, this is huge to us. Being an active implantable system, we are heavily scrutinized by regulatory agencies. So without having a good quality system in place, the company would have lots of issues trying to mature and grow and actually be commercialized in the medical industry. And lastly is product development. This is pretty standard, I think, across most of the companies here. We use it from creative development, R&D, or just standard sustaining work. And we use that to expand our product portfolio. So why are these important to us? Again, $2.2 billion by 2017. TERUMO Heart, we are in a very competitive race to capture the emerging LVAS market. It's very similar to how computers were in the 90s. Everybody's running through the latest technology, but you got to get to market. We're kind of at that same level. We're working on our next generation, keeping that competitive technical edge. And again, with our growth, we're moving from a very small startup company to an established Class 3 medical device company. So some of the operational challenges we had going into this was definitely cross-functional cooperation. Quality, manufacturing weren't always working together. They try and delegate work on each other. Was not the best form of getting items complete. Then the standard internal and external communication. I'm sure everybody has their silos. We definitely were very much a part of that and have been working to improve. The other biggie with that is the external communication. Our second generation is a dual kind of project with TERUMO Corporation back in Japan as well as in Michigan. So the communication between the two companies was a challenge to this point. And aligning projects to strategic goals. Everybody was just kind of working on projects before. Nobody really had due dates that meant anything. But now we had to say, is this really going to be a beneficial project to the company? If not, does it make sense? So aligning everything was a big step for us, and follow through on completing those projects. So if you kind of summarized all those challenges up front, with the poor communication, the cross-functional cooperation, projects would start, they'd stop. They'd be dragged on for way longer than they needed to be. So we really needed to align everything we were working on to help the company become successful. So how did we implement our PMO with Critical Chain and Concerto? In January, again, we just started everything off in operations. It kind of made sense to us. Operations had the majority of the projects going already. Lots of in-process, lots of upcoming projects with scopes pretty clearly defined. But then in March 2011, we really had to take a step back and say, wow, our portfolio is just growing rapidly. We needed to, again, align everything to our corporate goals. With that, the R&D projects were one of our large corporate goals. So the Durhart 2 project was within R&D. So that was the last group at our company that we finally had implemented everybody now to be using Critical Chain and Concerto. So again, with the dual project with TERUMO Corporation, John, in August of this year, flew out to Japan and actually did some Critical Chain training, Concerto training, and we were able to get the TERUMO Corporation Japanese associates into our system, and we're now able to track them with task updates, identify risks to the project. So it was a huge communication tool for us between the two companies. And now we're potentially looking at moving to critical suppliers. We've had a lot of success within TERUMO Heart, so we think that's a good step for us. So some of the results after rolling all this out, before our PMO and Critical Chain, we had a laser cover welding qualification that ran for 2 years. A lot of this was tied to the upfront challenges of communication. Quality would be working on something for a long time, then all of a sudden they needed manufacturing's input. Well, manufacturing didn't really know about it. They didn't have the resources at the time, so everything would kind of start and stop. After we initiated the PMO and Concerto, we were able to focus resources' attention. An extremely similar project, same template, ran for 6 months. So we had a 75% improvement from before implementation. So we were pretty happy with those results and knew we could take them a little further in the company. The other thing from a visibility standpoint, before our PMO as well, we would find activities we didn't complete when we were preparing phase closure documents. So then that drove a rush of activities. Everybody's trying to get stuff done before the phase closure. Did not provide for very good results. Using Concerto, we now can get risk up front. If it's potentially 6 months down the road, we could see a week delay. So then that drives all those buffer recovery plans and strategic planning to make up that week well in advance. So again, a great risk tool that we've used. And the increase, this is to the resource. So in the past, individuals were getting 100% on their goals, but yet the company was only achieving 50% of their goals. Didn't really make a whole lot of sense, and the company was not moving forward with those types of results. So going back to the functional managers, well, how come stuff isn't getting done? Well, they'd say, well, we need more resources. We need more resources. Well, they couldn't be justified because their associates are getting 100% of their goals. So once we backed everything out, used Concerto to align the company projects to the goals, we can actually see what is the true timeline, how many resources is it going to take, and be able to move forward in supporting our next generation product. So again, unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of historic data to go off of. We were primarily a small R&D company trying to get our first DuraHeart system to market. We didn't have a whole lot of data, but from inception of Concerto and our PMO, from January of this year, we could say 70% of our projects have finished on time. For those projects not completing on time, 90% have finished within 1 week of the project due date. So we're looking to improve in that category because for the most part, those are really small issues. Potential functional manager signatures on final reports, people were traveling and we don't have somebody on the bench to fill in for them. So some of the small hurdles that we really want to improve on are on-time delivery. But overall, we've been very pleased with our result to date. So with that, I will turn it over to John for some of the changes we've made.
Thank you, Dave. So I'm going to be talking a little more about the changes we made and some of the things that we've learned as we've been progressing through. As Dave mentioned, some of the things that we had to deal with at the start was a number of projects that were not really needed for the company. When we first started back in January, we looked and made a list of all the projects we had, and we came up with 130 projects that we were actually working on, but weren't actually supported by the other departments. So we had to trim that down and clean it up for just our first initial 3-month implementation to get started in this progress. Some of the unique PMO features, all the PMO managers that we started with in January were hired from within the company. We didn't actually go out and find experienced project managers, people that were certified or anything like that. We decided to take the go-to attitude guys from the company. We grabbed a mechanical engineer, a chemical engineer, an electrical engineer, so we had nice broad coverage over different projects. We also then had our PMO managers perform their own scheduling. So we had to create the templates, we had to create the task lists, we had to create the schedules, load them into Concerto, then we had to follow up and actually teach people how to use Concerto and how to make the updates. It got us very involved in the details of how Concerto is managing these projects. Finally, we started to learn that while we have a lot of projects and we're starting to get good at running projects, we have some programs for this company. As Dave mentioned, our next generation product is something that's very important to us, and it's going to be a collection of a lot of projects. So we started calling these things global programs. On the next slide, I'm going to show you a little bit on how we started to develop a way to handle these global programs. We also recognize that Concerto is doing a great job for us. It's giving us a lot of visibility, a lot of accountability, a lot of information. We do need some other communication tools, and so we started using SharePoint together with Concerto to try and drive both communication as well as task assignment and buffer management. Okay, so for our global programs, as I mentioned, a global program is a project that has a lot of little sub-projects. It's really a high-level type thing. It's going to be a multi-year thing, 3-5-year type of a project to run. So we'll still create a project plan for this global project. And in there we'll have nice little tasks defined. But these tasks aren't real tasks. These tasks are actual projects that we need to run. So we'll be looking out over the next 3 to 5 years, what projects do we need to run in order to support this program. And what we'll do then is, as we get into the next 3 to 6 months, we'll be looking at just the 3 to 6 month projects, and we'll go forward and actually detail those projects out. We won't try and detail the entire program out. We won't be able to have that much information or that much accuracy. So we don't worry about it. We just focus on 3 to 6 months and detail that out. This is our SharePoint site. This is actually the site that we use for our executive meetings. Every week we have a regularly scheduled meeting with our executives to make sure they are up to speed with what's happening on these projects, what's going on in the projects. And with this program, we're able to basically conduct a meeting where we'll start with our action items, our open action items, in a list from this site. We'll then go to Concerto, and it'll pull up what our exact portfolio is. We'll look at our red projects. We'll go in and look at penetrating chain reports, find out what tasks are holding things up. Then we'll go back to SharePoint and create action items for our VPs to either make decisions or to find out information or to support these projects. So it's been a nice back and forth collaboration with the communication tool and the task tool. With this SharePoint and Concerto both having access, we've been able to span it across to our parent company, TERUMO Corporation in Japan. We haven't got a huge amount of involvement there, but we do have now a group of about 5 to 10 people that actually will go in, see the Concerto tasks, go in and see the SharePoint, see what information is being there, what documents we've stored there, and they can start to recognize what tasks they need to do and what direction we're giving them and which is the priority tasks to be completed right now. They're also now being able to feed back information to us of where they stand on these tasks, what may be holding them up, what information they need from us, or what information we need from them. It's been working out very nicely. Some of our obstacles that we have, as mentioned in several other presentations, there are silos, and we've had a lot of silo issues. Our manufacturing department was running on its own, quality assurance running on its own, R&D running on its own. Everybody sort of ran their own projects and didn't talk to their groups. So to support this, what we ended up doing is we took our VPs and we made them a sponsor of every project. But we did a trick to them. We took the R&D VP and he could not be a sponsor of R&D projects. He had to be a sponsor of a clinical project, a marketing project. Likewise, we took the marketing VP and he had to be a sponsor of a manufacturing project. It forced them to step outside of their own departments and to see what's happening in the other departments with their other projects. This really opened up a lot of these silos and is starting to get a lot of cross-communication going in the company. Another problem that we have with communication, the executives don't really know of all the issues in the projects. Before we had our PMO set up, they were always worried about strategic issues and everything else, and they never really knew what was actually happening on the floor, as it were. The associates also, because of the siloed everybody else, don't know when their support's needed. The production guys and manufacturing guys don't know when R&D needs them to build a prototype or something of that nature. So for this, we've been using our penetrating chain reports quite a bit to help drive what is the actual critical chain task, what do we need to focus on to give those associates direction. But we've also recognized that we do need to have kickoff meetings before each of these projects. And this is important because at the kickoff meeting, we can explain exactly what each task is in the project, who's got what role, what responsibility. And then we do occasionally have to have project alignment meetings. Well, we've tried to limit the number of meetings we have. The project alignment meetings have become very important to make sure that people haven't strayed off and start to misinterpret what a task is for, or to misunderstand what other tasks are coming up later. They try to do too much into an initial task, not realizing a follow-up task is actually there for that. Another obstacle that we were trying to accomplish is alignment to our strategic goals. This is an example of before PMO, we'd have a strategic goal, which is the red chart, and that's being put up on all of our walls and tells everybody exactly what the goals for the company are. But every person would have their own Excel spreadsheet of their own individual goals, and they were completely disconnected. Each individual would make up their own goals, and whether or not they aligned to anything was a guess. We've now used Concerto, and we've actually created one of the filters in Concerto to match our goals. So our Concerto filter is the exact wording of our corporate goals. And every single project has to be aligned to one of these goals. So you can go in, you can filter in and see exactly which projects are supporting our next generation product or which projects are supporting implementing new management controls. Everybody knows exactly how their task is aligned to those strategic goals. Another obstacle, as Dave mentioned, we didn't have particularly good follow-through on projects. They sort of drift in and out and in and out. We didn't have a particular project closure process. We didn't have a constant focus on the projects, and we didn't have consensus when projects were complete. We would start a project and it would have a certain goal. We would kind of achieve most of that goal, but more goals would get added to it and it just kind of start rolling. This is something that, to be honest, we are still under construction on. We're trying to figure out how better to work our post-mortem process to give us back the information we need from the projects and to formally say, yes, the project's closed, we're done with it. And with that, we need to create better scope documentation, which is going to help us to ensure that we have defined our scope up front. At the end, when we have a post-mortem and a project closure, we can say truly the project is done. We've completed all the goals. Some of our lessons learned. This is one that we came up to early on, and I just kind of want to make sure I put it out there to give everybody a sort of warning when you're going into planning critical chain. We follow a strict philosophy of we'll cut our tasks in half, all of our tasks in half, and then we will create a critical chain, and then we'll create our buffer off that. when we do that, some of our tasks are non-negotiable. We have vendor lead times that if it's going to be 12 weeks, it's going to be 12 weeks. That's when it's committed to. When we start to plan our projects, we would cut that in half, and so we would immediately go red, and we wouldn't have any visibility to are we actually running the buffer priority correctly because it is so red. So we've started to pull those either out of the projects, or we found ways to figure out what the buffer is and then add that task back in after we figure out the buffer. And so we only are managing the buffer of the tasks we control, in-house stuff. Another thing that we've been working on is scope control. As I mentioned earlier, we are trying to better define how we define our scope and document our scope. We don't want to get any task additions put into the project halfway through and start building the project into a bigger project than what it originally was. We also are looking at missed tasks, and it really becomes underneath roles and responsibilities. People don't understand what their role is or responsibility is, and so a task gets missed. Lesson learned here, we're starting to work with work breakdown structures, and this means, well, it's not something that we want to put into all the detail into our concerto projects. It is something we need to do to make sure we haven't missed anything when we start the project up, that we actually have identified all the scope of the project before we get started with it. And then, as I mentioned, the kickoff meeting has become very important to reiterate those roles and responsibilities. And we've found documentation, and we really should have known this, being in an FDA environment, if you don't document it, you haven't done it. Well, all these agreements that we've made when we load these projects and everything else, we're starting to document all of these things so we can come back to them when we close a project and say, yes, this is what we agreed to, and everybody can agree we've met our scopes. In summary, our initial problem that we had was the company was unable to achieve strategic goals. As Dave mentioned, the company was achieving about 50% of its goals, while people were achieving everything. Our solution was to focus on critical chain tasks for these strategic goals, and the result is now the company is achieving the strategic goals. Our next steps now is to expand control of this over more corporate projects and to continue spreading out, as Dave mentioned, potentially into our vendors and definitely expanding the scope in Japan. Any questions?